本期视频是两位外国学者在播客中讨论为什么人民币在国际金融体系中的分量愈来越重，以及对于像中国这样的大国来说，建立战略石油储备的极端重要性。我们看看他们是怎么说的吧。
The surplus countries that could recycle their flows back into the U.S. seem to be countries that the U.S. is directly antagonizing, like China, Saudi Arabia. I mean, like what's happening in Gaza with the U.S. backing those activities, it seems to me, going to make the Saudis less and less likely to want to show up at the Treasury auction and buy a bunch of U.S. debt, right? So how do you see all that?
You saw last week what I think was a massive event. The Central Bank of Saudi Arabia signed a swap line with the PBOC, the Chinese Central Bank.
Yes.
Now, why the hell would they do that? Why they've got a pegged currency to the dollar, and they've got what they sell is priced in dollars, right? Oil. So why would they need a swap line with China? Signing a swap line with China is in essence saying we're going to need renminbi. Now, why would Saudi need renminbi for? Is Saudi starting to signal that they might depeg to the U.S. dollar, that they might start signing long-term deals with China for oil in renminbi? I don't know the answer. What I know is they announced this currency swap, and to me, that seems like one of the most important monetary developments of the recent years. And surprisingly, like nobody's really commenting on it. And I've been trying to get my head around it.
Yeah, I think
it's a momentous event.
I think those developments are super interesting, and in fact, I think it's becoming more and more plausible that Saudi could get security guarantees from Russia and China, just as it has now from the U.S., because their military technologies and presence are going to be sufficient to guarantee Saudi security eventually, so that they could shift over to a different patron than the United States.
Well, I think it's not so much security guarantees, but for me, the one of the biggest developments of the past year, again, that we didn't really mention much in the Western world, is how China got Iran and Saudi Arabia around the table to shake hands and make a peace deal. In essence, this was like the Camp David Accord, except it wasn't brokered by the U.S., it was brokered by China. And what China basically said to both Saudi and Iran is it said, look, I'm your biggest trading partner, both of you. Like, you now sell more to me than to anybody else. And I want to do more business with you. And I want to invest in your country. But I'm not going to do that if you guys are going to go to war with each other. Mm-hmm. Because if you go to war with each other, I'm going to lose on both sides.
Yep.
So, if you guys get along, we can do a lot of great stuff together. Now, the reality is, Iran, the only reason Iran survives is at this point China. And economically, Saudi Arabia tried to crush it. The U.S. tried to crush it. But given that it's got China's backing now, it's not gonna get crushed. So I think Saudi realizing this says, okay, China can always put pressure on Iran to do what they want. So I might as well and if you're Saudi, you only have one enemy. It's Iran,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not worried about Israel. Israel's not going to come attack Saudi. So your only enemy and you're no longer worried about Russia or the Soviet Union like you were in the past. So your only enemy is Iran. So, if you can cut a deal with China to cut a deal with Iran, that takes care of your biggest problem. And I think that's what we've seen.
I think you've mentioned that instead of recycling its surpluses into dollars or treasuries, it looks like China might be building up oil reserves or energy reserves with those surpluses. Is that part of the picture here?
I think it is. It's very tough to know what exactly China's doing with its reserves, but there is something. Indeed, China's got trade surplus, like we mentioned, 75, 80 billion a month, but China's actually not only not been buying treasuries, but letting its existing treasuries expire. So it's basically using fewer and fewer treasuries out there. Stocking fewer and fewer treasuries. Now, if you're China, why would you have treasuries in the first place? Well, you bought treasuries to cushion the, your potential hits on commodities, right? Or if ever tomorrow, you either can't get access to dollars or commodity prices go through the roof for whatever reason, then you sell your treasuries and you buy the commodities you need. But if you're China, and especially following the Western world's grabbing of Russia's treasuries, if you're China, you think, hold on, I've been accumulating treasuries in the case I needed oil. That was really the main thing. So maybe I just accumulate oil. Like, why the intermediate step where I make myself dependent on the willingness and ability of the US to deliver me my money when tomorrow, they've shown that they can take it away in a heartbeat. So I think the nationalization of Russia's reserves was the biggest foreign policy own goal, since probably the start of the Iraq War. I think we cut our nose to spite our faces. Western policymakers wanted to be seen to be doing something to punish Russia. And what we did is we said, okay, let's tell the biggest commodity producer in the world that they can't use US dollars. And I think we thought like this, they won't be able to sell their commodities. And we never stopped to think, well, they'll sell them in another currency.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is exactly what's happened. And I think any 5-year-old would have figured that one out, but somehow we rode right past it.
So I remember, I think 5 or 10 years ago, China didn't even have a strategic oil reserve. And have they publicly declared how big that's going to be and how far along they are in filling it up?
No, and China's that's like complete top state secret. And so I think there's a lot of reserve accumulation at the importer level, the Sinopecs of this world. I think they've been building more and more sort of storage capacity, but they're definitely building strategic petroleum reserves. If you look at, the official consumption numbers, the official production numbers, and the import numbers, China's probably been importing 1 million barrel per day too much. Somewhere between half a million and 1 million barrel per day too much for the past couple of years. Which again, I think if you're China, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You've got too many dollars. You don't know what to do with them. And at the same time, you're living in a world with much more geopolitical uncertainty. You've got the US that you feel is out to get you. You've got a war between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, tomorrow, for all you know, and I don't think it's going to happen, but if you're China, you plan for the worst, you hope for the best, you plan for the worst. Tomorrow, again, in China's point of view, but what if Russia sort of devolves into a massive civil war? Putin dies, is killed, falls. You had a sort of glimpse of it with, the Wagner group's march onto Moscow. Yeah, you're like, I woke up that Saturday morning. I thought, oh my God, I don't own enough oil. If Russia starts to collapse into a civil war, it's like, what price oil? So if you're China and you think, okay, maybe that's only a 5% possibility, but if it does, it's going to completely screw my economy. Why wouldn't you stock oil?
I think
especially if you got too many dollars that you know what to do with.
I think it's a no-brainer. They had to at some point build a strategic reserve. It was kind of just their development outpaced their scale risk.
Their ability to do so.
What's interesting though is when they get to the point where they've reached a reasonable level for that petroleum reserve,
SPR.
Will they continue to just stock up oil as a store of value or something because they don't want to own treasuries? That when they get to that point, it becomes a more kind of interesting question. It's like not for free anymore, right?
No. To your point, look, there is a cost of building an SPR, right? You got to pay the storage, and it costs money. You don't want to just do it for forever. So yeah, at that point, what will they do with the extra dollars? My guess is it'll be a pass the parcel game. They'll be buying assets. They'll be buying copper mines in Africa. They'll be buying, fields in Argentina to grow food. Whatever asset comes up for sale, they'll pick up, because on a 20-year view, owning a copper mine in Zaire or in Zambia or in Mozambique might be a smarter trade than owning a U.S. Treasury anyway.
Yep.